In the quiet corners of the day, in the moments between the noise and the necessity, there exists a space. It's a space often overlooked, yet it is the most vital space of all. It's the space of prayer. For many of us, prayer is a familiar concept. Maybe it's a ritual before meals, a desperate plea in a moment of crisis, or a whispered list of requests before we sleep. It can feel at times like a monologue sent into the silence. We speak, we ask, we thank, and we wonder if anyone is truly listening. Welcome to our exploration of the prayer lives of great believers. But what if prayer was meant to be something more? Something deeper, richer, and far more transformative than a one-way conversation? What if it was less about changing God's mind and more about changing our own hearts? Less about asking for things and more about encountering a person? Throughout history, certain men and women have seemed to grasp this mystery. Their lives burned with a purpose, a peace, and a power that felt different. They faced the same hardships we do: betrayal, loss, doubt, fear. Yet they emerged not bitter, but better. Not shattered, but fortified. What was their secret? It wasn't superhuman strength or a life free from trouble. Their secret was forged in the unseen hour. It was cultivated in the quiet, private, daily practice of turning their entire being toward God. They didn't just say prayers, they lived a life of prayer. Their entire existence became a continuous conversation with the divine. This video is an invitation to step into that unseen hour with them. We are going to journey beyond the surface of prayer and into its depths. We will walk with giants of the faith, not to put them on a pedestal, but to learn from their journeys. We will see their struggles because they too knew the ache of a wandering mind and the dryness of a silent season. And we will discover the practical ways they pressed through and found a connection with God that sustained them through everything. This is not about adding another item to your spiritual to-do list. This is an invitation to transformation, an invitation to move from ritual to relationship, from repetition to revelation. So find a comfortable space, take a deep breath, and let's begin this journey together, into the heart of prayer. To understand the depth of prayer, we must first sit at the feet of those who practiced it so deeply. We begin with a man whose writings have guided millions into a deeper faith, yet whose own prayer life was rooted in a simple, powerful surrender. Oswald Chambers, a name synonymous with the devotional classic, "My utmost for his highest." But before his words could impact the world, they were forged in the private furnace of his prayer life. Chambers was a Scottish minister and teacher who eventually ran a small Bible college in London, and later served as a chaplain to Australian and New Zealand troops in Egypt during World War I. His approach to prayer was breathtakingly simple, yet profoundly difficult. For Chambers, prayer was not a means to get God to do what we want. It was the place where we align our will so completely with God as Sanguras that our desires become His desires. He famously said, "Prayer does not fit us for the greater work. Prayer is the greater work." Let that sink in. We often see prayer as the preface to action. We pray so that we can then go out and do the real work. But Chambers flipped that entirely. He believed that the time spent in unseen communion with God was the most critical work itself. It was in that space that the power for all other work was received. His prayer life was characterized by a relentless focus on the sovereignty and sufficiency of God. He didn't approach God with a list of demands, but with a heart of surrender, ready to receive whatever God willed. He wrote, "The purpose of prayer is to reveal the presence of God equally present all the time in every condition." But was it easy for him? Absolutely not. He spoke of the discipline of prayer, of the need to brook no dullness in the matter. He understood the struggle of a distracted mind and a weary spirit. His journey into this deep prayer life began with a crisis of faith in his early 20s. He felt a profound dissatisfaction with his own spiritual shallowness. He prayed desperately for God to do whatever it took to deepen his faith and usefulness. This prayer led him on a path that wasn't always easy, including his service in the horrific conditions of WWI. But it was there, amidst the dust and despair of war, that his prayer-forged faith shone brightest. He didn't pray for the war to end immediately. He prayed for the soldiers to find Christ in the midst of it. His prayer life gave him a stability that circumstances could not shake. So what can we learn from Oswald Chambers? We learn to shift our perspective to practice viewing prayer not as a task. If Oswald Chambers teaches us about surrender and prayer, then Corrie teaches us about prayer in the midst of unimaginable suffering. Her story is one of incredible courage, but its foundation was a raw, honest, and persistent prayer life. Corrie grew up in a devout Christian family in the Netherlands. Their home was always a place of prayer. In fact, her family's prayer life was so integral to their existence that when the Nazis invaded, it was the most natural thing in the world for them to risk everything to hide Jewish refugees. Prayer wasn't a separate activity. It was the air they breathed. This foundation was violently tested when the Ten Boom family was betrayed and arrested. Corrie and her sister Betsy were sent to the infamous Ravensbrück concentration camp, a place designed to break the human body, mind, and spirit. It was in this hell on earth that the depth of their prayer life was revealed. In barracks filled with flea-infested straw, under the glare of cruel guards, amidst the stench of death, Betsy Ten Boom would pray, and her prayers weren't for immediate escape or vengeance. They were shockingly specific prayers of thanksgiving. Corrie recounts in her book, The Hiding Place, how Betsy insisted they thank God for everything in their barracks, including the fleas. Corrie was horrified, but later, they discovered that the very fleas that tormented them were what kept the guards away, allowing them the freedom to hold Bible studies and pray with other prisoners without interruption. This is perhaps one of the most powerful lessons in prayer we will ever encounter. Prayer is not dependent on circumstances. It is the lens through which we view our circumstances. The Ten Boom sisters didn't wait for conditions to be perfect to pray. They prayed in the midst of the worst conditions imaginable, and in doing so, they found God's presence there. Betsy's prayers were also for their enemies. As she was dying in the camp, her final words to Corrie were, "Must tell people what we have learned here. We must tell them that there is no pit so deep that he is not deeper still. They will listen to us, Corrie, because we have been here." Her prayer life allowed her to see a reality beyond the barbed wire. She saw the spiritual need of the very people who were persecuting her. After the war, Corrie's entire ministry of forgiveness and reconciliation was powered by this same prayer-sustained faith. She famously forgave one of her former Ravensbrück guards, an act that was humanly impossible without the strength she drew from prayer. So what can we learn from Corrie Ten Boom? We learn to pray in the pit, to not relegate prayer to the good times, but to practice turning to God immediately in frustration, fear, and pain, to offer raw, honest prayers, even prayers of anger and confusion, knowing He can handle it. We learn to pray thankfulness in all things, a discipline that doesn't mean being thankful for evil, but believing God can be present in the midst of it, trying to find one thing, however small, to thank God for in a difficult situation. And we learn to pray for our enemies, the ultimate test of a prayer life rooted in God-esque love, and not our own strength, starting not with a war criminal, but with the difficult coworker or the estranged family member, praying for their well-being, and watching how God changes our own heart in the process. Corrie Ten Boom's life screams that prayer is not an escape from reality. It is the way to find God's reality in the middle of our own. Active surrender of Chambers and the suffering-fueled prayer of Ten Boom, we now turn to a man who explored the vast, silent depths of communion with God, Thomas Merton. Merton was a Trappist monk, a writer, and a theologian. His journey to prayer was a journey from a chaotic, worldly life to the intense silence of a monastery. But his contribution to our understanding of prayer is perhaps more relevant today than ever. In a world of constant noise and distraction, Merton teaches us the power of contemplative prayer. For Merton, prayer was not about saying more words. It was about sinking into the wordless presence of God. He called it contemplation. He described it not as a function we perform, but as a gift we receive, a profound awareness that we are already in God and God is already in us. He wrote one of the most beautiful descriptions of this prayerful awareness. But at the center of our being is a point of nothingness which is untouched by sin and by illusion. A point of pure truth, a point or spark which belongs entirely to God. It is like a pure diamond, blazing with the invisible light of heaven. It is in everybody. His prayer life was a journey to that spark. It involved long periods of silence, solitude, and the repetition of simple prayers, or just the act of resting in God's presence. He struggled immensely with the balance between his very public life as a famous writer and his private calling to hiddenness and silence. His journals are filled with angst, doubt, and a deep sense of his own humanity. This is what makes Merton so relatable. He wasn't a serene, otherworldly figure. He was a complex, sometimes conflicted man who desperately sought God in the chaos of his own soul. His prayer was a refuge from the noise, both external and internal. Merton also had a profound sense of connectedness. His deep prayer life led him not away from the world, but into a deeper solidarity with it. He prayed for the world, feeling its joys and pains as his own. He believed that the contemplative didn't flee the world to save their own soul, but to become a hidden seed of life and compassion for the entire world. So what can we learn from Thomas Merton? We learn to embrace silence, to start small, committing to 5 minutes of complete silence each day, No phone, no music, no talking, just sitting, breathing, being, letting God speak in the silence, which often feels like a wordless presence. We learn to practice contemplative prayer, trying a simple method like sitting comfortably, closing our eyes, and choosing a sacred word, and when our mind wanders, gently returning our focus to that word. Not as a mantra to empty the mind, but as an anchor to hold us in God's presence. And we learn to see God in everything, praying for the eyes to see the spark of God in everyone we meet, letting our prayer connect us to the world in compassion, not separate us from it in isolation. Thomas Merton invites us into the ocean depths of prayer, where words fall away, and we are simply present to the God who is always present to us. Three very different people, a teacher in a war zone, a survivor of a death camp, and a monk in a monastery. Their circumstances could not have been more different, yet their source of strength was exactly the same, a deep, authentic, and persistent life of prayer. They show us that there is no one right way to pray. Surrender, thanksgiving, contemplative silence. The form is less important than the focus. A heart turned toward God, again and again and again. They weren't perfect. They struggled. They doubted. They got distracted, but they returned. And in that returning, they found a refuge that held them through every storm. In our next segment, we will bring this out of history and into a modern context. We will follow the personal journey of one believer today and hear how they are applying these very principles to find a deeper, more meaningful prayer life amidst the demands of the 21st century.